Different values celebrate all the beauty that we have, the treasure trove of jewels that we have on our planet, within our hearts, within each of us. It's the foundation or the subtext for everything that we do and who we are. What we have right now is an opportunity to create a more equal, valued society where each and every one of us can be truly step into what is most true to us, and for that to be of the highest contribution.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for being part of The Future is Beautiful. Thank you so much for all of you that have been reading my new book, Intuition, Access Your Inner Wisdom, Trust Your Instincts, Find Your Path, which was released in the UK in early December and Australia, and was released last week in the US and Canada. I love hearing from you and what practices or principles are resonating with you. If you don't have a copy yet, please do get yours. It's available as a hardback, Kindle and Audible book. And everyone that buys a copy can go to www.amisha.co.uk/intuition and sign up for a beautiful gift package that I've put together for you as a thank you for supporting me and this important work around intuition. In this gift packet, you will find meditations, workshops. You will find the PDF of the bonus chapter that I recorded for the audiobook, which has a lot more of my personal story around my relationship with intuition in there. The energy feels different this week as we have begun the latest round of the beautiful leadership immersion and presence mentoring, so much expanding into the possible. And I am reminded now, as always, how important this path of self-leadership is, that we may come into a relationship with ourselves where we live in the truest alignment to our soul's calling, and that we are able to be courageous and resilient and live a path of trust, so that despite whatever is happening in the world, we find our way of contributing in a way that is meaningful to us and that creates ripples of love, joy, beauty, and possibility into this world. If you missed it this time and weren't able to join us in the immersion, we will be offering it again later in the year. In the meantime, you can always join Presence Collective, which is our monthly membership community, where this month we are exploring the theme of sacred activism. This month's workshop has included questions around how to navigate competing narratives and theories, and how to find balance between overdoing and retreating when it comes to activism. You can find out more about this if you go to our website, www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/courses. This weekend, there is a fabulous event hosted by our friend Swati Martin, who's been on this show, which is the Tunche Global Consciousness Summit. And it's all day on Saturday, starting 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. GMT, so you can catch it in lots of different time zones. And the theme is There is Another Way, Shifting Our Paradigms. And what Swati says about this is that we are living through crucial times for humanity as some unprecedented events are reshaping our daily lives. As the world seems more polarized, more and more people are calling for a different consciousness. Old paradigms are questioned, and like many, we believe that new, empowering, love-anchored paradigms need to take over to create the more beautiful, loving, peaceful world we know is possible. There is another way. And the summit is all around shifting from old paradigms around identity, education, economics, politics, social, living environment, mindsets, and healthcare. So moving from we are separate to we are one, from a dogmatic education system to self-knowledge, from unconscious capitalism to sacred economy, from GDP to happiness, from punitive justice to restorative justice, from taming nature to earth intelligence, from scarcity to abundance, and in our healthcare, from symptoms treatment to holistic healthcare. And I will be offering an activation during the summit, which has incredible speakers such as Marianne Williamson, Chris Gardner, and Charles Eisenstein, along with a whole load of others. And so I highly recommend checking that out and joining us this Saturday. My guest today is Mandeep Rai, who is a global authority on values working with companies, institutions, and individuals around the world. She has traveled to more than 150 countries and reported as a journalist for the BBC World Service and Reuters, amongst others. She is the author of The Values Compass, What 101 Countries Teach Us About Purpose, Life, and Leadership, which takes us on a journey to 101 countries around the world, highlighting a single unique value that has defined each nation's history, culture, and global influence. This episode explores the themes of leadership, core values, and care for the elderly in this conversation called Standing on the Shoulders of Our Ancestors. We contemplate the question, how can values form our pathways into future society? I hope that you enjoy this episode. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. Mandeep, I am delighted to welcome you to The Future is Beautiful. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Amisha. I'm very happy to be here.
There's something that is so interesting about your work in that you have been studying and witnessing humans, people from all kinds of different cultures and countries, exploring values and how values form who we are. And I wonder if you can share with us what you have discovered that is universal and where the differences come in and how they affect us.
It's a great question. And one, not top tip, but one universality that I utilized quite a bit was the fact that everyone deserves respect, like equal respect. And it sounds very basic, but actually it's really profound that the same beating heart, the same light, the same blood that's running through you and that's shining in you is shining in the other. And how that kind of golden rule of treat others as you wish to be treated yourself, but almost better than that. Not to say that you're treating them better than yourselves, but a little bit. You know, that saying of God, the guest is God, or God, godliness, to see the God in others, I guess, and that they each and every being and living being and living human. So as you travel around the world, if you come at it with, or take your first step with that sense of life is beautiful, not just the future is beautiful, but right now is beautiful, then indeed it is. I remember my parents, especially my mother, being really apprehensive when I first took a trip overseas. I was offered a scholarship to go and study in Australia. And she was really, nervous about that. But actually, of all the trips that I took, the most nervous, or the one that made her most nervous or apprehensive, was when I said I was going to India to report for a year. And she said, there, I really know the dangers, and I really don't want you to go as a young single girl. I know what can happen, and it's not okay for you to do this. And I remember seeing fear in her and almost like all the bad scenarios that she'd heard of, that she's either experienced or she's witnessed or she's known about, kind of flash before her eyes. And you can't deny that those things happen. Of course they happen. But if you walk around expecting them to happen or waiting for them to happen, then of course the vibration around you is very different to a kind of a protective force field. And so in the book, in the Values Compass, one of my favorite vignettes is that of India, where I speak about how different I felt and how I was reacted to when I dressed in kind of the Sikh Khalsa robes, when I wore a turban, when I had that identity or that roop, and how one, differently I felt, but more importantly, how different people perceived me. And it's all optics. Everything we do, there's layers and layers and layers of optics. So yes, indeed, life is beautiful.
I can relate to what you share about India and how my parents felt when I was wanting to spend more and more time alone in India, doing my own thing, making deals, setting up supply chains, going to places that we didn't have any relatives, and also can really relate to the difference in what you wear and how that allows you to have a very, very different experience. And there was one day when I was in Delhi and I was probably in my early 20s and I was wearing Western Indian clothes, so jeans and a long sleeve top from India. There were so many men staring at me. I came home in tears, like I'd never experienced anything like it. And my cousins were like, yeah, that your Western kind of way is there. It's in your walk. It's, it's there in you. And then I realized, okay, if I want to have a different experience, if I wear a full Punjabi and it's just smoother, and then I don't have to deal with those extra layers. And then I can be in a space of deeper connection and I feel more comfortable and get to really embody that part of my heritage.
And indeed, I feel that's the same everywhere you go, that you can either, I don't want to use the word assimilate or amalgamate, but you can either be part of it or you can come in as an outsider. And everywhere I'd go, I'd try and, whilst being authentic, try and be respectful enough to, yes, like you said, to dress in a particular way that was respectful to their culture or their way of, seeing life and their worldview, and equally to talk in that way or to move in that way or to show at least a humility of, maybe I don't know what the right way is, but I'm very open to being told or taught or shown. And I think that makes a huge difference to, like you said, your entire experience. I actually think women have almost an easier, people often say, didn't you feel scared, or, what times of troubles did you experience, or, how was it being a single woman going around or a single girl going around? And I think it's easier. And not that I know what it's like to be a man going around, but my perception is that, you fit in as someone's daughter or cousin or sister, or, that people had a warm embrace.
Interesting. I don't know if I feel that, but I think we all have a unique kind of energy in us that will attract certain kinds of attention or not. And so we all end up having a different experience. And yeah, I mean, I've watched my brother travel around the world and he has a different experience, and it is harder in lots of ways and then easier in others. Yeah, it's really hard to know. I'm curious about this dynamic between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation, and how you've experienced that as you've traveled around the world.
What do you mean by appropriation and appreciation?
Well, as you were talking about dressing in a way that's respectful of the culture that you're visiting, there is a lot of talk about appropriation, of appropriating cultures that aren't yours, and that a lot of that's done in ways that are disrespectful. Wearing other cultures' signs that are unique to them from a religious or a deeply cultural perspective, and then when other people wear them, some view that as appropriation. And then there is a way of actually really appreciating another culture and moving towards it. And another aspect of the appropriation is when somebody might take something from another culture and then monetize it in some way. Yeah, just as you were talking about how dressing in respect of that culture is something that you find helpful and respectful to do. Yeah, what your take was on this question.
So would an example be wearing the cross of Christianity when you're not a Christian, for example, that type of thing? That's really interesting. I think, oh my goodness, I have so many examples and stories and flashbacks in my head right now. No one's asked me this question before. This is a deeply personal wish of mine, but it's in the future. And I don't know if it's culturally how it would be perceived. For me, it's cultural appreciation as opposed to cultural appropriation. But to another person, it could seem either disrespectful or inappropriate or inauthentic. And that's not how it's intended. I have this deep desire of being a pilgrim in Mecca. And I'm not sure where that comes from. I'm not sure whether it comes from a past life, or maybe I heard once that Guru Nanak had this pilgrimage of Hajj, or maybe it's just the images that I see of that yatra, which I find incredibly moving. I cannot tell you, but I can tell you that it's a very deep yearning and something that I think would be, I don't mean to say I'd die happy, but I do think it's a really significant moment that would be extremely dear to my heart if I were ever allowed to do that.
This thing around appreciation is so beautiful, really, at its heart. And I, as a student of yoga and a practitioner of yoga, I spend a lot of time with people from all kinds of cultures that have been really drawn into those practices. And there are some people you just can feel the depth of the resonance, whether that comes from a past life. We can't say like who anyone was in their past lives with any certainty, or whether it's a bridge building gateway that the future is offering. This notion around sharing has been something that I have witnessed and experienced a lot in my journey. The welcoming that you might receive from someone from a different culture, or people that might come to my house. When we were young, we used to host this garden party, and we used to invite all of the women to wear saris, and my mum would put them on for all the women that came so that they could enjoy our culture. And then we cooked Indian food for everyone, and it was an invitation into our culture. And this is where we want to be in a world where there is that appreciation and that celebration of different cultures and that opening of understanding. And yet there is a lot of shallowness and polarization in this world that we live in. I feel like welcoming that path of appreciation is so key to the collective movements that we're calling for, and that perhaps really do exist, and that a lot of the polarization that we see is, it has been created, manipulated a little bit, because there's something in our human nature that wants to share, that wants to pull up a chair at the table and invite a fellow traveler in, or in all of the religious stories, the guest, as you say, and invite them in and share, so that we can all be more connected and richer in our knowledge and way of life.
Yes, I don't think there's even a question of that. It's like I remember being in Jordan, and I remember feeling that there's this sense of everyone thinks they're hospitable, and the Jordanians are equally as hospitable as the Turks. But they kind of got this sense, they have this story, I believe it comes from the Quran, which I really saw practiced, to, if a stranger comes to your home and asks for shelter or comes in, you don't even need to ask their name. For 3 days, just have them be your guest, give them what they need, whether it be shelter, food, warmth. And after 3 days, you might want to ask their story or their name. But this idea of who are we if we don't look after one another? Sharing is aside. I mean, we're all one. So if you wouldn't have your aunt standing outside on your front doorstep and not allowed in, why would you have anyone else on your front doorstep and not allowed in? Like, it's only right to treat everyone with the same consideration and compassion.
And what about the differences that you've observed? In your book, you kind of attribute different values to different cultures. What was behind that way of doing it? And then within that, how universal are those values?
Well, I do believe that values are absolutely universal and that values unite. Beliefs might divide, but values absolutely unite. We can understand one another's values. We often share many values. But my idea of looking at a distinctly different value from each place was simply to almost celebrate all the beauty that we have, the treasure trove of jewels that we have on our planet, within our hearts, within each of us, and our uniqueness, really, so that, we gravitate towards different values evolve because of slightly different geography, slightly different history, slightly different cultural context, different politics, different, this whole combination of the context that we grow up in or that we live in has us evolve celebrating or utilizing a different value. The idea was simply, instead of writing a very academic book about, this is why service is, this is why we might want to look at service, or this is why we might want to be compassionate, or this is the value of patience, or the benefit of steadfastness. It was more, I just wanted to create something quite colorful and rich and useful, I hope, by taking you around the world and showing you how different cultures have utilized these values to bring out the best of themselves.
That's really beautiful. How do values affect who we are, and what are the different types of values? I mean, for me, values are what is underneath everything that we do and why we do it. And The Future is Beautiful was very much started from that place of what happens if we really get in touch with our values and then live outward from there, rather than get caught up in the day-to-day and like not quite get into that space of aligning. What is it for you? What's the importance of our values?
I completely agree with you. It's the foundation or the subtext for everything that we do and who we are. We pick them up from the moment we're born. Actually, some are innate, even in our nature, before we're born. And then they develop or morph depending on the home we're growing up in, the influences we have, our family, and then our friends, and then our peers, and then our colleagues. Different types of values are almost put on you depending on, your gender or your race or your ethnicity or your profession. All these kind of nuanced dimensions of values we're swimming in. And what I thought was really fascinating or powerful is the fact that we can get to a point where we actively choose our values, so that they're not just we're not just a product of what we've lived so far or our past, but we're a product of what we truly treasure. And then there's a greater, I believe, a strength, a greater strength and power and direction and harmony within your life thereafter. It's like an iceberg, and maybe the kind of top 10% you see as it plays out in life. You see what your values are when you're upset, or you see what your values are when you're completely free and in a safe space, or you see what your values are when you have to react to certain situations. But the other 90%, you're not really aware of. That's happening without you consciously having thought about it, having chosen it, it's just operating in your subconscious. And so my aim is to unveil that 90% so that your awareness, or one's awareness, is increased and intensified and within your choosing.
Do you believe that our values can change and that we can change our values?
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. I really believe in the fluidity of life, and that the last second that has just gone is your past. It's gone. What you choose in the next second is absolutely a choice. It's almost like saying, is the growth mindset possible? Yes, it's possible. Is neuroplasticity possible? Yes, it's scientifically proven and absolutely the case. Can we learn new habits? Absolutely yes. Are we able to change? 100% yes. It's the same with values. If you decide, for example, or choose, I prefer the word choose to decide. Decide is almost like killing the other option, whereas choose is much more active and all embracing. If you choose the value of listening, you would communicate a completely different way. And it takes a little bit of awareness. It takes a little bit of a conscious effort, but it absolutely is possible. And even that choice of listening can deepen each and every day. And each and every day we could get 1% closer, or be a 1% better listener, or more attentive, or more caring, or more, just to pay even that 1% more attention can make all the difference each and every day.
And so for you, it's something that we change incrementally in small moments, or it can also be something where we have big, deep, rapid shifts?
Both, either or, it's up to you. Yes, there can be incremental changes, and that can seem to some people easier, but to other people it can be a light bulb moment, or it could be a huge trauma that takes place, or it could be a big decisive, life change that takes place. So for example, we're going through a pandemic right now, and this moment, this kind of long moment that we're going through, this reset moment, has definitely brought about very quick changes that people have made, valuing their life to the point that they'll stay at home, and the whole family will stay at home day in, day out, and not see the elders, and not go to the shops and hunker down in order to really protect other people's lives and their own life. That's a complete shift in lifestyle and a complete shift in what we're valuing.
And also having all of the choice and the rushing around, and then also the economic hardship that many have faced this year, forces you to look at your values and feel into, like, do these values really align with what is important, and are you living the life that it is in connection to that which means the most to you? As things open up more, where do you spend your time, your energy, your money? What are you giving it to? This pandemic has been quite something for that. And for some people, that's been quite a luxurious process, a spacious process. And for others, that's been a real pressure chamber because resources have been taken away. It's quite extraordinary to see where we might land when this pandemic is finally over.
Yes, I think that idea of resources is so key. when push comes to shove, that's all we have actually. And they're a complete reflection of what you value. But often, if you haven't had this kind of conversation with yourself, then you could be spending your resources on many things that you don't value. And then you feel almost like there's a disconnect, or you could feel resentful or angry, like you're shrinking and you have no idea why. So for example, if you're a yes person and you're not able to really put your effort into what really is important to you, but and I'm not saying that service is not important to you, but it might be that, for example, if you're musical or you're a creative, and yet you constantly say yes to helping out in a different way that's not true to the talent that you want to bring to the world, for example, or to your core gift, then it might be meeting one of your values, but actually you could equally volunteer or help or contribute and be meeting 2 or 3 of your values. And you'd feel so much more at peace and not just joyous, but also joyous and therefore full of energy and more in line with, since we're both Indian, I can say the word dharma, more in line with your real calling.
And so can we look forward to your album in a couple of years?
Because you think I'm musical and creative?
I'm just playing with you because that's the example that you gave.
Yes, I would love. One thing I do want to invest a bit of time in is my voice. I'm aware that, I use my voice to speak. I've never used my voice properly to sing or create as in, musically, or to even sing Shabad or Kirtan properly. That would be quite, who knows? Maybe you will. I've never explored it, but I'd love to. I'd really love to.
And what are your favorite ways to open into this relationship of choosing core values that feel more aligned and authentic?
What are my favorite ways?
Yeah, are there some practices or some modalities or ways in of opening? If one of our friends listening is saying, hang on, I feel really disconnected from my core values, or I feel like I'm living in a way that isn't true to who I am, what would you suggest for them?
Well, the book takes you through a very clear, concrete process, which helps you. Like I literally have written right at the beginning of the book that this is a book that requires something of you in which you're active. Get a pencil or a pen, get some post-it notes, underline, highlight, and allow yourself to see what you react to. Even when you look at the contents page, there'll be some values you'll quickly skip over, or some countries you'll skip over, not because you're not interested in the country, but just the value doesn't resonate with you. And there'll be others that you'll be drawn to. Even that is telling. And so it's a process of going from those possible, 101 different values. Actually, there's 102. There's a bonus of happiness. So to go from all of those down to your top 5. And 5 because it's a nice balance. You can handle it, as in it's manageable, but equally there's diversity and variety within that. And then to prioritize those top 5, equally, it's important and powerful, because if they're all at the same level, again, you can get yourself, stuck. You're balancing between 2 or 3. So you have to force yourself, and there's a process for that, to pick a number 1 for this time frame, and then a 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 being the least important of the 5 that you've chosen. And then it can go on. You can have others, but the more clear you are of your top 5, the more manageable and easy and harmonious life becomes, because you're clear about what's important to you at that time.
And how does this relate to leadership?
When each of us are leaders, each of us are leading our lives, we're leaders in many different respects, sometimes within the family, sometimes within your organization, sometimes within your community, sometimes you could be leading a youth group, whatever it is, or whatever situation you're in, but it's especially true with your lives and then beyond. It's the same principle that when you become clear about your values, then your leadership has a greater integrity and depth and clarity, because you've put the thought in, you've done the homework, so to speak, you've chosen, and you're not just reacting, you're actively and consciously creating a particular path or goal or vertical or vortex.
Yeah, I mean, one of the core phrases around this podcast is embody your values. And for me, we have a leadership program which has a lot around this. And I do this one-to-one leadership work, which is very much around clearing the subconscious patterns and deconditioning ourselves to really come to that place of authentic understanding of who we are, and therefore what it is that we have to offer into this world. That relationship between, in a way, the values that we've inherited culturally, ancestrally, what might feel actually more true to us as the world's always changing, everything's always moving and opening in new ways. And so we can be dynamic and keep opening even more and keep feeling into, what's here now, what's true now, and how does that allow us to be present for the future, if you like. What are your top 5 values and how do they play out in your life?
So I am a big advocate for the fact that, 1, your values are a choice, and 2, they can change given the context, the time, period you've chosen, your goals, etc. I say that because they vary, right? They vary given the context. One of my top 5 is freedom, exploration, growth, creativity, and love. I would say kind of an umbrella or one foundational, or almost like the wrap around them would be some form of service. Like when those things are present and there's the opportunity to contribute or give, then I'm more alive.
Can you share an example of how those values might come together and create a moment of aliveness and real presence?
I've never put it like this before. It's only in talking to you that I'm beginning to see how this has actually directed my career. So, for example, all of those values fit into journalism. You're growing, you're exploring, you're connecting, you're free to choose what you cover to some degree, and free to choose who you speak to, and free to choose how you frame it, or at least I look for the opportunities to have that freedom. But then there's a sense of service. Hopefully you are working towards a piece that you really think will contribute to society, to contribute to knowledge, contribute to a framing of closest to the truth that you can see or that is possible, something that really contributes to other people's growth and freedom and exploration also. I almost feel that I love the fact that I used the word vortex in my previous answer. It's almost that kind of positive circle, kind of cycling vortex upwards, in that those values are, 1, important to me, but 2, then I look at how can I meet those needs of others. And in many respects, this is what the book is absolutely about also. It gives you that sense of exploration and freedom. It creates a safe space where you can mull over these ideas, but then also grow on your own terms. And I hope, therefore, that that's of service and of contribution. In knowing what I value, I then offer that or share that with others.
Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the Global Patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members, and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now back to the conversation. Yeah, I feel like this relationship between that which we value, our gifts, like when we're really living in our gifts or living in our dharma, we have that sense that we are also embodying our values. It's all different language for something that is the same. And the challenges that we face in our life also give us what it is that we need in order to kind of step deeper into that embodiment. When we're doing it in a really authentic place, it always meets something that is of service to the world, of service to our communities.
Yeah, absolutely so.
What has been stirring for you during this pandemic? What has been captivating what's captivated you as what's possible?
I think building on your last point about when you become close to your gifts and your talents, that naturally leads into service. I think what's captivated my imagination during this pandemic is the fact that everyone has had a moment of reset, whether it be that they rethink about how they do their work, or they change their work, or they no longer work, or they're in furlough, or however it be, there has been a change in how you operate. And that freedom that this reset moment has given, I hope and I see, has allowed people to say, actually, this is a moment where I have an opportunity to explore my talents. Like I'm thinking about, for example, a deputy head who has this passion of bikes, and really his passion is repairing bikes and contributing in that way, or people who have always been in perhaps a corporate job and have stepped out to do something creative, or and I know many new businesses that have formed in this time, one to solve a problem, but more importantly, I think because the solution is within that person, they can creatively see how they can contribute their talents. I remember once while I was in Cuba, I was really struck by the fact that the great gardener and the doctor and the teacher and the artist all seem to, and this is 20 years ago, all seem to have a kind of an equal contribution and standing and reputation and value within society. And I think that what we have right now is an opportunity to create a more equal, valued society where each and every one of us can be truly step into what is most true to us, and for that to be of the highest contribution, and hopefully therefore also be respected and valued with that same appreciation.
Do you feel like universal basic income could be a good leveler to create that.
I've been thinking about not just the 4-day, is it the 4-hour day or the 4-hour week? You know, I've been thinking
a 4-hour week. Yeah, you don't have to do that every day if you're in the Tim Ferriss world.
Exactly. So I've been thinking about, well, we're all utilizing technology in a completely greater level than we ever have before, and work has totally changed. And so, yes, I think that there's a moment where we will work, in inverted commas, differently, potentially less, and be compensated differently, and potentially, I was going to say potentially more equally. I don't know about a universal wage, but I think there's an opportunity here to create potential. I mean, even global equity, right? What's now stopping, although this happened before in the past, it's definitely happening to a greater degree now. What's stopping anyone hiring anyone from anywhere if we're all working virtually? I mean, this could be an incredible leveler, a great opportunity.
Yeah, I actually really love the remote working way of life, and I've been living it for several years now. And part of the reason I love it is because I feel like it allows my work to be part of my life in a different way, and it also allows me to be present in my life in a different way. And I feel like, I don't know, I always found offices, I mean, there's something that's kind of fun, but I also found that there's a lot of time wasting and that time can, you can get caught up in whether it's gossip or unnecessary meetings or really lovely social events, but that can sometimes take you away from your core values, which might be family members that are sick or children or things that need more of your immediate attention. And I feel like it's so wonderful to be able to really allow us to be more fully human as people that also work. And I had quite a hard time getting UK-based clients to be open to doing remote mentoring sessions before the pandemic. The US clients were more open to it way before, but that's really changed and opened up. And I think for me, where the time, of course, it's gorgeous being with people and collaborating with people and getting to sit in the same room as people, but it's also really wonderful to invite more of their lives into that work, to see where they are, and to sometimes get interrupted by their family members, and it brings this realness which actually makes everything more integrated and less siloed, and allows us to really to see who someone is in a different way that opens up connection. And so for me, I've really been focusing on that because I think it's really easy to get really, I miss meeting up with people in real life. And, this is awful. And we're so disconnected, but connected. And of course, I love being with people in real life. And I look forward to gathering and that level of connection. But for me, I just always see it as an invitation. Where's the invitation in this? Like, how can I actually connect in a different way by having a Zoom call than if we had gone to meet in, an office or a cafe or whatever? And how can that actually invite in more of who we are and more of our values being lived?
Yes, no, I absolutely agree with the idea of seeing it as an invitation and what is the gift here. I do think there's a time and a place. When you're young, let's say you're an apprentice, think about how many things you learn from an office so subtly, that walk to the taxi with your boss, where your boss says something, so helpful, or that coffee with someone, with a mentor, or even just being at the coffee machine and being able to subtly drop an idea without, just to see how it floats, or even just being able to mirror and see how do other people do things? How are other people managing their inbox? How are other people not getting overwhelmed? Like there's pros and cons. And so I do look forward to the hybrid model.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. There are all of those non-verbal cues, ways that we learn from each other. And when you're younger and you're looking for role models as well, like it's very interesting when you find yourself in places like the BBC or the Houses of Parliament, and you're watching how this whole thing operates and getting to be part of it. And you definitely don't get that from online calls. You miss all the subtle moments. You miss bumping into somebody in the bathroom and what that can open up.
Yes, I remember recently, actually, I was just told this morning, so I run or do something in my local neighborhood every single day, like I'm out every single day. I would deliberately look for new paths, look for new ways of spending that half hour or hour or time outside, just for the variety, just to see different faces, just to perhaps, otherwise we can really get stuck in just the people that we know, and our world becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And also, I don't know about you, but I really miss all the little conversations that happen in daily life that now aren't happening unless you're deliberately, sitting at your PC for the next however many hours, or you're deliberately setting it up. And even then, you're really setting it up with people. It might be some people that you don't know, but it's not, you know what I mean? It's not the many people that we were exposed to before. That variety. I mean, you can imagine for someone like me who was a little bit more, traveled a little bit more, this has been a very interesting period.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed actually the getting to go in and deeper and having a bit more energy for certain things than maybe I normally would when traveling between places and all of that kind of thing. I feel like the invitation is always to find the gifts in what is, and then be creative around how to invite in more of what you need, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's funny. I found that stepping out, like lockdown, was almost quite comfortable because it is what it is. You know what it is. But the non-lockdown periods are harder because everyone's become used to a virtual world, and you're then juggling a virtual and a physical world. And that's actually been a little bit more challenging than either just the physical world that we had or the only virtual world that we had. This juggling is really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm somewhere where I have friends and colleagues that I could be going for really lovely walks with, but my schedule's completely full with online conversations. And so then I'm like, oh yeah, I don't know how to make that happen, which is really an interesting moment. And I guess that's part of the integration, right? And the shifting and the finding the hybrid model.
Yeah. I think we are going to go to hopefully a universal 3-day weekend probably after this. I think everybody needs a break. That's for sure. That's very clear to me. And then thereafter, we need to find a way, because in many ways, I think people have become more productive. Every single minute of the day is almost being accounted for, or being a potentially, you could be productive, and therefore it's either opportunity cost, or that we have to create some way of making this all sustainable. Otherwise, I think we'll have many, already we do, and increasingly we will have many more burnt out people or exhausted souls. You can't sustain this schedule, right? You want to have a break. You want to have a walk.
Well, I am going for walks, just not necessarily with other people because of the, mapping people's schedules. And because I also work a lot, maybe at times when, there's just different people have scheduled calls at different times. And then you're like, oh yeah, no, I don't really have time to go and get lost in the wild with that person. But I'm definitely finding my own moments to go and get lost in the wild.
Yeah, I think the one part of life that I really, to your point of finding the gift or the invitation, is with the elderly. This has been a really tough time for many many older people, and the isolation that has come about. I hope that we can find a way of reversing that, deliberately reversing that after this.
Yeah, because it was, at first, it just felt like it was going to be a couple of weeks or something, and then it's gone on and on and on, with some very tragic results and some real horror stories as well around what elderly people have been experiencing during this time. And I really welcome us working out how to integrate that care back into our communities.
Very much, very much. Yeah, I mean, even just the world becoming more digital and how difficult that can be for an elderly person, how difficult all this change can be, how difficult the isolation can be. I'm not saying it's all difficult, but there are definitely some elements that are harder. We need to make sure it's in our hands. We need to look after them.
Do you have any ideas of how that could happen?
Well, one thing that we're doing, but of course it's difficult right now. I hate the word difficult. I'm going to drop it. Sorry. It's once the vaccine has come about, we can make some definite deliberate moves towards that. Right now, the way we're going about it as a family is to make sure that we are mindful and careful of when our parents and grandparents don't want to be visited, but equally make sure that we are tested and that we've been isolated for some time, and that we actively do go and spend time with them. Once we're in a safe space to really make sure that they know that this is not a never-ending isolation, but in fact there are ways and means of us spending time together, creating a bubble, and actually just to show them that they mean even more to us in this time. And to give our time also in your local community. It can be the giving of food, the making of food, the sending notes, the calling up. Like in times of lockdown, then that's, you're resorted to those type of actions. But after, in the periods that there's not lockdown, then we can definitely have that more human interaction. I mean, just massaging. When I was younger, and I've started to do this now too, when I was younger, I used to go to an old people's home. We lived right behind an old people, in front of our old people's home. I would go and paint the elderly people's kind of elderly ladies' nails and massage the elderly men's kind of hands and feet. Just that human touch. It meant the world to them. This hasn't changed. It would mean the world to them now too. And it's like a practice we could absolutely do. Or one thing we do is to go and sing with the elderly people, or to be creative with them, or to play board games, or to laugh and joke and just bring joy in, to share stories and to hear their stories. I mean, like you said, to your point about what do we have? We have just our time and our resources. So if you value, for example, the elder generation, or indeed families, or the 40% of the population that is suffering right now, or just even your future, because this will soon be your future. To your point about resources, you would spend your time, you make a concerted effort to make sure that the elder generation are okay. The elder generation are not just the source of who we are, but they're also our future. The more kind of disregard we give, that's the future we're creating for ourselves and for others around us. We need to be mindful of it now. I think there's been a huge change in the lifestyle of elderly people, and we need to be mindful of it and make sure that we put into place the care and construct communities that are truly deserving and protective and caring and worthy of all that they have given in during their whole lives, that they're truly integrated.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we're able to appreciate that wisdom, and that it is powerful for us to be honoring and in service of our ancestors, our living ancestors. And I have stories that have really broken my heart through this pandemic. A friend shared that her grandmother, who was very full of life before the pandemic started, in a care home, and the rules in the care home to protect from COVID meant that she was basically locked in her room, no visitors, not allowed to talk to anyone else in the home, and not actually allowed to go for the walks that she was going for before. And then she died because it was just like, yeah, because life had been taken away. Yeah, it brings about such interesting questions around values, actually, and opportunity costs. You know, in that particular example, was it safer for the people in that home to be isolated in that way? Or was that, in fact, more dangerous for some people? And how do we navigate these complex times? You know, with the vaccine, for example, there's a sense of like, oh, the vaccine's coming. And then, of course, there's a whole anti-vax movement. And I was looking at the government website about the vaccine, and there's some very scary information really there on black and white, especially for women that might be wanting to conceive in the coming years. And so we're always having to balance these values and choices around life and what is the sacredness of life. Yeah. Do you get the vaccine? Do you isolate the elderly? Do you keep your children isolated and sheltered away from other kids? You know, we're always having to make these decisions. And I feel like our intuition and our values are the way in which we can navigate this, because we can't rely on a really clear top-down instruction that's going to work for everyone.
People knew so little about this virus. We saw the mistakes that took place and anyway, there wasn't any clear guidance, firstly. And secondly, I think that's just a reflection of how little that was known and is still known. Like, you know, we know some things, but we know that, for example, it doesn't pass through children in the same way. To your point about the elderly, I think there are certain communities, more matriarchal communities, or communities where the elderly are really respected. And I talk about the appreciation that comes from Cyprus, for example, where, you know, the youth will take their grandparents out. And yes, they might go and party at 11 o'clock once their grandmother's tucked back into bed. But, you know, they've had a really special meal together and they've danced together and they've laughed together. And you see that same kind of respect or care being paid in Asian countries like, you know, Japan and China, and then also in Italy, like the nuclear family, and also in Indian families. So to your point about that, the lady who died as her life became almost unbearable or not worth living, this sense of how long is this going to go on and how can we give them hope? Because when each and every day we talk about mental health, well, mental health in many circumstances can be managed or can be boosted and helped. And it's in our hands to do that. Otherwise, there's no point talking about mental health or giving medication, more and more medication to the elderly, when actually there are so many things that can be done that would naturally boost them. So whether it be physical touch, whether it be going out into the sunshine, whether it be vitamin D, whether it be communication, whether it be just knowing that you're going to interact and interconnect with your grandchildren and your children, and that there's things to look forward to and that you're integral to their lives. And, you know, you have these joyous moments. I mean, we all know how many sacrifices our parents make and how often they're having to manage so many things, and how different that stage of life is for our grandparents. And grandparents often have a space where they can truly enjoy their grandchildren in a way that sometimes parents can't necessarily enjoy their children. And for grandparents not to then have that space, or to be told, no, grandma, we're doing this to protect you. I'm not saying we shouldn't protect our grandparents. I'm just saying we should be mindful of what they're going through. and to make sure that life going forward has them involved and, in the best way possible, in a truly honoring way.
And perhaps something that we can share from Indian culture that's so beautiful is the practice of touching the feet of elders. I remember as a child in India, my dad would be like, "Oh, touch their feet." And I'd be like, "Oh, no, why do I have to do that?" And then seeing actually that the real beauty in it, that when you meet an elder, that you take that moment physically with your body to touch their feet, to recognize in deep respect the path that they've trodden and how that path has allowed your path and the future to emerge. I find that some of these beautiful rituals and practices that we have in different cultures, they open us up to really embodying that respect and to remembering.
As soon as you've touched their feet, well, then you're almost already closer to listening to them, to listening to their stories, to listening to what makes them laugh, or what was it when they were younger that really enlivened them? What can we share? What can we learn? What can we give? And even just the dust from their feet, right? There's this kind of practice of looking after shoes and putting shoes to almost touching the dust of the shoes of the elderly, which happens in many, many temples and gurdwaras. And that is all about, it's not just the shoes, it's just that path that's trodden, and even the dust of their footprint is enough of a blessing. So imagine beyond the dust that you get to spend time with them. What a complete blessing that is. I come from a family where I didn't actually get to spend so much time with my grandparents. I think this is perhaps where this is all coming from. I lived in the UK. One set of grandparents had moved back to India. The other set of grandparents were in the States. And I really cherish and know the value of the elder generation, I think, partly because of that, and partly because of it's in our culture to care. And then partly I've seen the benefits. I've seen the longer lives and the richer lives that cultures have when they're really valuing and protecting their and respecting and revering the elder generation. And as I said, I think that those kind of elder years come much quicker than we expect, or than we would, before you know it, you're part of that generation. So it's a fabric of the tapestry of life and the diversity of life. We talk about diversity and including the young and including women and including race, etc. But I also think we need to include the elderly within that all.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. And I can really relate to growing up actually with no grandparents in the country, and handfuls of visits, and not always being able to communicate fully in the same languages, and feeling that loss, and yet that inviting me into a deeper relationship with understanding ancestors and understanding the lineages from which I've come through. And I feel it's a really important aspect of immigration. And, there's so much movement of people at this time, and with this refugee crisis as well. And what happens to the elderly and what happens to the young without that relationship, and where can we build into our society ways of deepening that relationship in ways that are multicultural, and that even extend out of immediate family into community.
Yes, I think in many ways this is one of the reasons that the book is what it is, or that I wrote the book. We talk about business leadership, but where are those leadership practices being? Where have I learned them from? And in many cases, I did go, perhaps it's that the lack of my grandparents, that I was interested in interviewing the wise and those who had the depth of experience and the wealth of experience, and had seen so much and seen the cycles of life, that seen the kind of rhythm and as much as we think we're creating the future, often it is a cyclical future that we're creating, and we can learn so much from the previous cycles. And I mean more than just history. I mean the kind of repetition and what we can learn from that repetition.
Yeah, I love that. And that inquiry I'm going to sit with of whether the whole reason I'm doing this podcast is because I didn't grow up with grandparents. And therefore, yeah, like there were friends and their parents, and I rarely met their grandparents. You know, sometimes it was more like, oh, you can't come over because my grandparents are coming. Yeah, something that as a child I never really thought about, but it's interesting how that might have opened up a deeper quest for wisdom.
Yes, I think that we're standing on the shoulders of our ancestors, but do we really know the stories of our ancestors? And if we're all interconnected, which we are, then all those stories can be interwoven, and maybe we're creating just a broader set of shoulders by reaching out and collecting those stories so that we can stand on a more solid platform, on a platform that we know and that we've heard, and that we've seen the twinkle in their eyes as they were speaking, or we've seen the joy, you know, and all the range of emotions as they're sharing and as they're imparting and as they tell us, oh, don't worry about this, we've seen this before, or, you know, like, and just to give that sense of perspective, measure, and longevity to it, that it's not often whatever we think we are experiencing or going through. And also I think it brings this kind of sense of calm to know, wow, they went through so much, potentially so much more, or they've seen it before, or it does bring the sense of balance, calm, and kind of integrated. I don't want to use the word just knowledge and wisdom, but it's like knowing.
Beautiful. It has been lovely to speak to you today, Mandeep. How would you like our friends listening to connect with you?
Well, firstly, I didn't know this conversation would go into the spaces that it went into. So I talk about many different things, normally business leadership. So in whichever way, or whatever part of this conversation, or indeed the spaces that it hinted towards, but that we didn't delve into, feel free to connect with me on any of the social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. But much more importantly, I have a website which has all my contact details at www.mandeep-rai.com. And there should be my email address and contact details also. Yes, just feel free to reach out. And I'm happy to even share my email address if that's what people do. I don't know if that's what people do.
No need to, no. People can find a way through your website, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a very wholesome conversation, and a very, deep and rich conversation. I almost want to kind of go to the Fiji Islands right now, or some islands where you can, you know, sit at the feet of some elderly grandma and and feed her soup and massage her feet and give her the warmth and love that both of you, both us and she deserve.
Well, there is an invitation. Maybe we don't need to go so far. Maybe there's someone in our lives or on our street or in our community that would appreciate a foot rub and some soup right now.
I think that's definitely the case.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listeners' support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question: how will you create beauty in the world?